Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is our third broadband conversation in a series of broadband conversations, part of the Fox Island Broadband Task Force Community Broadband Campaign. The goal of our campaign is to share broadband information, education, and options with our community, with the goal of eventually reaching community consensus to select and fund a universal broadband solution for Vinyl Haven. So on December 3rd, we launched this campaign with a presentation of our 2020 broadband report, which, if you haven't read, provides a high-level look at Vinyl Haven's options for a universal broadband solution. And our first campaign conversation looked at a private ownership model for broadband. Our second conversation, which was last week, was a public-private model for universal broadband. And tonight's conversation, we're going to look at the benefits and challenges of one community's way to deliver universal broadband. And that's Islesboro's publicly owned network, which is operated by an ISP contracting with the town. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Gabe McPhail. I work in the Vinyl Haven Planning and Community Development Office, where I facilitate committee and town projects. I'm joined tonight behind the scenes by my colleague, Matt Jablonski. Matt is our Island Fellow. He's working with us at the town office. And before I get started, I'm going to run us through our Zoom etiquette for those joining in the Zoom room. And bear with me because I'm sure by now all of us know this, but to keep us all on the same page, please stay on mute unless you're speaking. If you have something distracting going on or you're doing something distracting, it's best if you keep your video off. If you are joining us by phone, please *6 to mute. And one thing that we are aware of and see the irony of is that this broadband campaign is being conducted on networks that are likely not fast, they're not reliable. So if you get bumped off or the only way you can join us in the Zoom room is by phone, please give us a call in the Zoom room, and Matt is going to put the Zoom number in the chat along with the meeting ID. So you can always just hop on by calling that number and join us by phone. If you would like to rename yourself to however you would like to be referred, please do that. And if you have any tech issues while you're in the Zoom room, please reach out to Matt either in the chat or by contacting him on his email. And Matt's going to put his email in the chat so you can connect with him. To keep things streamlined tonight, we'd like to take advantage of the Zoom chat as well as Facebook comments. So throughout the presentation, anytime you have a question, please put it in the Facebook comments or in the Zoom chat. We're going to collect all those questions, and at the end when we have our Q&A, we will go through the questions and ask as many as we can. And if you cannot access the chat because you're joining by phone, we will have time at the end for verbal questions. We'll make sure to include that at the end. The last thing I want to say before we introduce our speakers is that we are going to attempt, as usual, to not use broadband jargon. And if we do, we'll do our best to make sure we're explaining what we're saying. However, thanks to Jan-Ann, we have a new broadband glossary, and Matt is going to put a link in the Facebook comments as well as in the Zoom chat, so you can access that PDF document and look up any words that you need to look up. So thanks to Jan-Ann for that handy glossary. So now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Our Fox Island Broadband Task Force, Jan-Ann Sherman, is with us as usual. Jan-Ann is a retired history professor from Tennessee. She settled on the island in 2013, and 2 years later, she joined the Fox Island Broadband Task Force. And her goal really was to help assess current and future broadband needs and options for our community. Joining us tonight from Islesboro is Roger Heinen. Roger has 45 years of computer industry experience. He joined Digital Equipment in 1973 as an individual contributor and rose to become the corporate consulting engineer for software. In the late 80s, Roger was hired by Apple Computer as senior vice president to lead all of Apple's software development organizations. In January of 1993, Microsoft named Roger senior vice president, developer division, responsible for developer tools and database technology. Roger and his wife moved to Islesboro in 1996, and working from there, Roger embarked on a career as a lonesome cowboy angel investor, focused on mentoring and financing early stage startups. Roger is a veteran of more than a dozen public and private high-tech boards, as well as many nonprofit boards. Roger holds degrees from Worcester Polytechnic Institute, WPI, and the Stanford Graduate School of Business. And tonight we may have members of our Fox Island Broadband Task Force joining us as well. I'm gonna give a quick look in our participants box. I don't see anyone in yet, but if we do have some members joining, I will let you know. In case you have any questions that you want to direct to task force members, just indicate that in the comments in Facebook or in the chat for Zoom. So I want to give you a quick overview of our format for tonight. As usual, I'm going to present a quick background on the Fox Island Broadband Task Force and the work that the task force has done to date. We'll launch into our conversation with Jan-Ann and Roger. We will share information about the Maine Broadband Coalition's speed test project. I'll share with you a few of our campaign next steps, and then we'll spend the rest of the evening doing a Q&A. So, a little background, and bear with me, folks, if you've been joining us all along, you'll have heard this before. But our Fox Island Broadband Task Force was formed in 2015 after the publication of the Tilson study, which you can access from our website. And the committee's mission is to support the town in its efforts to pursue a broadband solution for Vinyl Haven. And the goal for that solution is that it be affordable, accessible, future-proof, and available to everyone in the community. We have a 9-member committee, all very active. The work that the committee has done since its inception and through the various reports that we've been able to work on, we have come to land on these goals as being fundamental to our broadband solution. And as we learned last week from Mark Green of Long Island, these are very similar to the goals that they have, and likely we might hear that they are also similar to Islesboro. So these seem to be common for communities looking to improve their broadband. So in 2019, the work that the committee had completed to date led to us soliciting an RFP to produce a high-level study of what it would take to have a publicly owned broadband solution for Vinyl Haven. And that is contained in the 2020 Broadband Report, Vinyl Haven Internet Planning Document. So if you haven't already accessed the report, you can do so by going to the town website, and you'll see in the news and announcements, join the Vinyl Haven broadband conversation. And that's right on the homepage. Click on that and you'll see a link to the report right there. So where we're at in our process is right here, the community campaign. And we are working to assess what we want for our broadband solution in the community. And our end goal will be to pursue funding to make that solution happen. So with that, I'm going to jump off my screen share and I'm going to turn things over to Jan Ann, and she will begin our conversation with Roger. Thanks, everyone.
Turn on my mic. Hello, Roger.
Hello,
Really
Julie.
glad you're with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think this will be a really interesting conversation. Let's just start with, what was the internet situation when you guys decided you needed to do something?
When we originally did the survey, or what I call a census of the island in 2013 and early 2014, we found that most people were utilizing the consolidated Fairpoint DSL system. There were some people using or trying to use cell technology hotspots. Some people had thrown money at the problem and had private radio links to the mainland. And we found that there were people who couldn't actually ever get DSL because of where they were. And we found that the capability that people were trying to use varied quite a bit. So most people were using DSL, and that's where we started from. And we listened quite a bit to what people told us in terms of what they were paying for the service they were getting, what that service was, and what they thought they liked about it and didn't like.
So you basically just found out what you had and then tried to come up with something to do about it.
Well, that's right. That's right.
So why did you choose the model that you chose? I mean, did you consider anything other than fiber, for example, or did you think about other working with partners and so forth, as we've been trying to explore?
Yes, we explored in two dimensions, one business model dimension and the other technology dimension. Let's stick to the business model because I think that's what you really want to hear about tonight. But briefly, I'll say that fiber is the best solution that we could find for our system. It's very robust. It's held up during the storms. We've gone 3 years with only one multi-subscriber failure. And the benefit of using fiber is that there's very little powered equipment. There's power that we need to have at the central office, and then each individual subscriber's power has to be on. But other than that, there's no other powered gear. And if you look at technology like Red Zone Wireless uses, that requires quite a bit of powered gear to be up and running for the system to work. So we looked at lots of technology options. At the same time, we looked at more than half a dozen business models. And frankly, my going in position when we started this was to start a company and seek investors and develop a privately owned, privately operated system that would overlay on the island. But very early on, when we were talking to the community about that in our public meetings, we got quite a bit of pushback, and I'll summarize the pushback on the private option as, well, that's great. That means the big summer houses are going to have great internet, but my school kid, or there will be a school kid who can't afford it. And that caused us to take a little bit of a turn and think about other options for how to run this. At the same time, we too did an RFP to incumbent telecommunications companies. We got about half a dozen responses. We asked them to solve 3 goals, and maybe you've heard this before, but I'll tell you again and repeat it for people. The goals for the RFP were, we wanted the system to reach every house and business on the island. We wanted it to meet or exceed FCC broadband definitions now and into the foreseeable future. And we wanted service and support at least as good as CMP was providing for the island. And those 3 goals came directly out of our census work. So we did an RFP, and most of the solutions or most of the proposals we got were amounted to what I would call corporate welfare payments. And I mean this sincerely, where the proposal was basically, please write us a check for $2 or $3 or $4 million and we'll see what we can do. That was roundly criticized by the community when we presented these answers. But one proposal from a company in Biddeford called GWI caused us to think that we could do it in a very imaginative way. And what they proposed was that if someone or the town could invest in the fiscal infrastructure of the network, the fiber, the pole attachments, and so on, then GWI could operate the network and light up and provide service and support and internet connectivity to the subscribers. And then we switched gears and we said, okay, now how are we going to pay for it? And again, we thought, oh, we can find investors, build the network out of, with private money. But more and more, the townspeople said, no, why isn't this like a bridge? Why isn't this like a toll bridge where the town builds the infrastructure and then contracts with someone to operate it and collect the tolls from the people that are using it? And that is the proposal that we then eventually pitched to the community at a series of town meetings, where the town would borrow $3.8 million to build a fiber optic network that would reach potentially any home and business on the island, and that any home and business that opted to have the service would be installed for free as part of that build out. And that was a good, almost 25% of the cost of the system was the installations in the 600 plus homes that we did. But the key to the kingdom in terms of getting voters' support for this is that I was able to show that fully the increase in the property tax and the subscriber fee for 83% of the houses on the island would be less than people were currently paying Fairpoint for DSL service. And that has proven to be true and is even more dramatic now, that most of the property owners on Islesboro, by a great majority, pay less than they were paying in 2014, and they get 1 gigabit fiber optic broadband. It's very reliable. The other homeowners, it's mostly and I'll be honest with you, it's mostly the large summer homes the high value properties, yes, they pay more than the $85 a month benchmark, but they get enormous benefit. And most of them have come back to us and said, for instance, they couldn't have been here during COVID without the broadband to connect to their home office.
Absolutely.
And they have enjoyed dramatic improvements in their property values. So all in all, it's been a win for everybody. But the key to the kingdom is that when we did the math, we showed that we could do this all up for less than what people were paying. And that took some explanation. We had to have several meetings to help people understand the math for themselves. But again, most every homesteaded property on the island ends up paying now less than $85 a month for really terrific internet.
And that includes the rise in the taxes.
That includes the increase in the taxes as well as their monthly subscriber fee.
Well, that sounds like
and I should add that $85 also includes a phone service. So you get unlimited phone service for within that $85.
wow. Wow. And of course, once you got fast internet, you can get rid of the dishes and the cable TV and all that sort of stuff.
Well, that's a really good point. And I use that in my presentations to the community. I use that as the icing on the cake. You know, not only can I save money on your phone company bill, but I'll also save you money because you can give up DirecTV satellite dish service, which most people were paying upwards of $100+ a month for.
Oh, yeah.
And we can show you how to stream TV on the internet for significantly less. And again, the community really has resoundingly taken advantage of that and ultimately saved money. And as I said early on, I'm the last person in the room to suggest increasing property taxes. But in this case, it was a way of engineering this. And the other last point I'll make on this is that the townspeople, the community, felt very strongly that if the town was going to borrow money to do something, they had to own the thing they borrowed the money for.
Exactly.
So no one was interested in writing a check to a telecommunications company, but people were interested that the town would invest in an asset that probably is worth more than we paid for it at this point.
Yes,
Could be.
indeed. Yeah, it seems like so many of these public-private partnerships, as you say, basically give us a check. You build it, and we'll use it.
One, I can still remember one person that stood up at a community meeting, an info meeting, and said, so let me get this straight. We're going to pay them $2.75 million. And for that, they're going to rent us the equipment. They're going to charge us what they charge people anywhere else. And is that what you're telling me?
Exactly.
and that's the way it is. But I don't begrudge them. These large telecommunication companies answer to shareholders.
Yeah.
And they have to have a certain investment model that they use and that works for them.
So what kind of an arrangement do you have with GWI?
Yeah, go ahead.
Who sets the terms of all this?
Well, that's another good point. Because the town itself has contracted with GWI, the town embodied in the select board has tremendous control, if you will, ultimate control over what the subscribers pay, the service quality, and so forth. The contract with GWI was signed early on. They provide service and support. So we have a telephone center where if you call in with a problem, a GWI telephone service center employee answers. If there's a problem, then they come out to fix it. And we require them to have an on-island contractor, one or more people on the island under contract that can do most routine repairs. Because one of the issues that we had in 2014 is that, frankly, if your consolidated system went down, you could wait a week for the technician to come out on the ferry, because they just didn't come every day. They came once a week. So we have an on-island technician that will roll in his truck and do any repairs, or most repairs. Sometimes we've had one instance where the repairs were a multi-person job, and we had to get people from the mainland to do it. Otherwise, usually someone on the island can do it.
Yeah.
But and the deal is we pay GWI per subscriber per month, and the town pays for the repairs. So the financial architecture of the system is that the town taxpayers maintain the system in good working order, and the subscribers pay a bit more than it costs for us to actually get the subscriber connected to the internet. So the subscribers pay $360 a year to the town, and the town then uses that $360 per year to pay the monthly fee to GWI. And it's a very straightforward contract. They've been terrific to work with, and you know, it's so far been, knock on wood, very, very good.
How big was your system? You mentioned about 600 homes that were connected.
We've had a bumper crop of installations this year. We were running half a dozen installations per year in the first couple of years after the construction. And this year we've had close to 40 new installations on the island. So we're running about, we'll be pretty close to 660 to 670 subscribers. When we did the financial model that we shared with the community around the $85 a month benchmark, we were only projecting 550 subscribers. So we're doing much, much better.
So that's a take rate of roughly what? I'm thinking in terms of take rates these days. So
I think it's practically everybody.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. That's what
we know that there are people out here, you know, some people in summer cottages where they're here for a month or a few weeks, just don't think it's economically a good thing to do. I think they're foolish, but that's pretty much the entire island is on the system. And universal coverage is a very interesting dynamic. We're one of the few places in the country where we can claim that just about everybody in town has connection to an exceptional internet.
Yeah. So how long did all this take? I mean, you're done now, right? I mean, the system is to go.
Yeah, we've been
started thinking about it in 2013.
Well, I'll be honest, in that little bio, it said that I moved to the island in 1996, and I did a presentation that summer on the wonders of the internet. And so I guess it started in 1996, but the select board got involved in 2013, having received a letter from a young family with children in the school that basically said, we got to leave the island. We can't, my wife can't run her business that depends on the internet. We can't get DSL at our house. And, you know, basically this is death by 1,000 cuts. And the select board at the time took that very seriously. If you want to get the select board's attention in Islesboro, you threaten to leave because maintaining the population, especially of the school population, is very, very important, the full-time population. So the select board kicked off a campaign that was about late 2013, early 2014, And we got approval to build the system in 2016 from the voters to borrow the money to build the system. And as I said, we've been operating pretty much full time now for since early 2017. We've had customers lit up.
So that they've got access to up to a gigabyte, but each
No,
home
no.
doesn't have that, right?
Oh no, each home, everybody, there's some lessons to be learned in how to do this inexpensively. And frankly, we worked very hard on trying to save money, operating cost money. One of the things we discovered and decided was that if everybody gets the same service, that means that everybody has the same piece of equipment. We only have to inventory maybe 24 spare pieces of home electronics, maybe even a dozen at times. There's no person at GWI that's worried about whether you have 50 megabits or 25 megabits of service. So there's no tiered services. There's nobody in the back room worried about those issues. There's no adjustments that have to be made. So everybody gets the same thing, and that is a symmetric gigabit up and down to your home with essentially a fiber dedicated to your home or business. And that was a tremendous cost saving. The other cost saving by standardization was that GWI is a business, and if they build the customers, they build our subscribers, it was going to cost us more because they had to account for bad debt issues. They had to have the billing and the mailing costs and the people back office costs for those things. So we said, well, the town will bill once a year and you don't have to worry about bad debt. So that's what happens. That saved on the operating cost, those two decisions, standard equipment, no tiers, and the town billing saved 25% of the estimated yearly expenses. And as a result, kept the taxes as low as possible.
And so the summer people who may only be there a month or 2 or 6 months, they're paying the same amount I mean, you don't have another tier, as you say, a different price for temporary, because the infrastructure costs the same whether or not people are there, right?
It's exactly right. And we leave the system up all the time to people's homes. That way they can put their alarm systems on it or something like that. It's a very interesting dynamic with the summer people. And the fact is that many of them come from, let's say, Washington, DC, where to have broadband internet in your house or apartment would cost $100 a month. And so they come here and they get it for much less than that. That's one factor. And they just realize that there's an enormous benefit for the community to have invested in this system. So, and they can be here. This past summer, we had a pretty vibrant summer community. COVID allowances factored in, but there were a lot of people here working from Islesboro because frankly, their internet here was better than it was at home.
Mm-hmm. And they felt safer, obviously.
Well, they felt safer. In fact, it caused the public safety people some fits because there were people all over the island that usually weren't there. So.
Yeah. Now let me see what I've got here. I think you've answered so many of my questions that I had all broke down into various categories, but so let's review a little bit. It cost to build out that you borrowed for the taxpayers to worry about. Would you say
$3.8 million?
Okay.
And let me also just to give ourselves a pat on the back, I think we had $8 left when we finished, so we didn't go over budget. A lot of the naysayers said, "Oh, you'll never do it. It'll go over budget." We had $8 left.
Well, good for you. That's cutting it pretty darn.
Or I don't know,
close.
maybe it was more or less than that, but we ended up in the black.
So there's general satisfaction. Everybody's got the same thing. It's cheaper than anything else. What's the bad news here?
Honestly, the only bad news is that this ends up being essentially a department of the town. It does involve some town office time. Tina in the town office does all the billing and handles customer call-ins and so on, and new installs. So there's an overhead at the town, but the finances provide money into that part of the budget so that that's covered. But it does take time to administer this. We have a broadband committee of six residents that oversee the GWI contract and their performance and the policies. And the select board ultimately makes all the decisions. So the select board could decide to, say, change the yearly fee. The select board can change the policy at any particular meeting, and that gives enormous comfort to people. But the downside is this involves people in town doing some administrative work. If you had a deal with a incumbent cable provider, Time Warner, for example, then there isn't much that the town office has to do to maintain that. But the select board, as I said earlier, are really interested in this and the benefit of this for the island. And since 2014, we've had quite a few changes in the select board, and we haven't had any of the select board members say, "Oh, this was a bad idea. Let's do something else." And frankly, if there's one takeaway from this entire project, it was that without the select board's air cover for us, it wouldn't have been possible. The select board was instrumental in making sure that this progress kept happening.
Is there any kind of accommodations for people who can't afford it, that really need it? They got some kids, they live in a trailer out on the end of the island. Is there any sort of built-in help for people like that?
Well, one thing, two points, and the answer is yes to your question, but there's two ways we approach this. One is that part of the bond, the construction budget, was, as I said, a free installation at your home if you signed up. And that we did that. So more than 600 of the subscribers were installed during the construction time. The second thing is we work with the local community fund, which helps people with oil when they need it or healthcare when they need it, and that they have occasionally stepped up to help get the install done or help people pay their yearly fee. So I will tell you that we have found a way to get the system to every home that needs it. And it would just drive everybody nuts if we found out there was a school kid on the island who didn't have it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about equity. And it's all about having control over your system yourself.
Well, that's true. And that's a benefit of this. And as I said when I started, there was a tremendous pushback about doing something that would create haves and have-nots. And people universally said, that sucks. Excuse my term, but it's a technical term.
We all use that.
I think that's what I heard at the info meeting. And as a result, we just said, no, we're doing that. Everybody gets the same thing. Well, if we can find a way to pay for it and get the town to approve it, we'll do it. Otherwise, we just won't do it.
Yeah. Well, okay, I've kind of, I'm not thinking of any other questions. Are there things that you want to tell me that I haven't asked?
Yeah, the construction phase took a lot of time and effort. And at the time when we were doing this in 2014, 15, 16, the truth is nobody in the state wanted us to succeed. The island wanted to succeed, but we had roadblocks every step of the way, from the telecom companies. The state PUC rules were antiquated. So it cost a lot of, I didn't have gray hair when I started. And that the first 6 months of the construction and going through the process, dealing with the roadblocks, was very, very difficult. I'll tell you it. And in my bio, I've done a lot of big projects in my life and run big organizations, and this was one of the hardest things I've ever pulled off. But the good news is Connect Maine, the Maine Broadband Coalition, the governor, the entire state now wants broadband everywhere.
Exactly.
And that was championed by Angus. He was one of our earliest cheerleaders, but many of the roadblocks that caused us time and a lot of money have been fixed in the last 2 years. You can now find money to get planning done from the state. There's grant money. At the same time, frankly, when we talked to the telecom companies in 2014, they didn't think we were serious. And now you can honestly get the attention of a telecom company if you're serious. So those things have changed, and I think that it's an easier road now than it was almost 5 years ago now.
Yeah, a lot of things have changed, largely because of you in many ways.
Well, we've never been on a crusade. We've never been on a crusade to tell people, oh, you should do it the way we did it. We found an answer that worked for Islesboro. I've talked to dozens of groups around the state doing it, or trying to do what you're doing. And I said, you got to find your own answer. And for every municipality, there's a different answer. And I applaud you for just having the enthusiasm to try to get something done, so that nobody is without internet, because you can't function in 2021 or the next 10 years. It's a terrible digital divide now for the people that don't have it.
Yeah. And I think COVID has made it so much clearer to how isolated and cut off we are when we don't have it.
Well, that's certainly true, but none of us could have predicted COVID back in 5 years ago. We never imagined. I worried about the bandwidth at Super Bowl Sunday, but it doesn't turn out to be nearly the bandwidth we've chewed up during COVID.
For sure. So that gets me to my last question. Do you have any advice for us? Anything that we can avoid or make a little simpler for ourselves?
I think you shouldn't. The two things. One is the town select board really has to be the chief whip in saying, we need something done. We have to have better internet for everybody in town. That's number one. The second thing is that we only really started thinking about money and how we were going to pay for it in the latter part of the development of the proposal. And that's very important because you can get scared by the numbers. The numbers are big, frankly. You know,
Yeah.
The total IMB, but you know, we probably spent close to $4 million when all is said and done to get the system up and running. That's half of what we spent on the school. So it's a lot of money, and by any stretch of the imagination, it's a lot of money. So, and people get frightened about the impact on the taxes, and I think that's justified. So it's important to not get hung up on how you're going to pay for it before you even start deciding what you're going to try to do. And I think you guys have made a lot of progress.
Well, we're trying. It's there's so many moving parts on this,
No?
and I think having people like you and the other speakers we've had have been a tremendous help, and I've learned a lot. And they give us so many different options to think about as a community.
Well, and I think that the three groups you've chosen, Islesboro and the others, have helped you triangulate on the various ways that this can be done. And again, I think for every municipality, there's a different answer. Portland doesn't have the same problem Islesboro or Lincolnville or Vinalhaven has. So they needed to have a different solution, but you know, internet access is very, very important to people in Portland, and it's frankly important to people in Islesboro. And again, I think it's true that Augusta really have become believers that the lack of broadband coverage in Maine hinders the economy of Maine in ways that no one would have guessed 5 years ago. But now people believe, if you talk to people in Augusta, they honestly believe that the lack of broadband coverage holds Maine back.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Well, thank you very much. As I said, I learned so much from you and so much to think about. I want to leave time though for people who have posted questions and stuff to ask you directly. So I'll turn it back to Gabe.
Thank you, Jan Ann, and thanks so much, Roger. Really appreciate hearing all about Islesboro's journey, and there have been some great questions coming in, so we look forward to getting to the Q&A. Matt has just posted a link in the chat, so on Islesboro's town website, there's a great comprehensive history of the broadband efforts, and I just encourage folks to check that link out and just read in detail more information about the broadband journey on Islesboro. So per usual, I'm going to give a plug for the broadband speed test project right before we do our Q&A. So I'm going to do a quick switch over and share my screen, and just bear with me for a second. So Matt's going to put a link in the chat for the Maine Broadband Coalition speed test. So this is a project, again, through the Maine Broadband Coalition to map speeds of internet around the state, and we're hoping to get as much participation as we can on Vinalhaven. So if you have internet, even if it's really, really, really bad, we encourage you to check out the link and take the speed test so your speed can get mapped. And that's really going to help not just us, but certainly help with broadband efforts across the state to look at what broadband or internet reality is in terms of speeds versus the current data, which essentially is what the incumbents are reporting people have access to and not what really exists. And I don't know if folks remember when we had our December 3rd conversation and Kendra Jo from the Island Institute introduced us to the broadband speed test. I think she popped over to Islesboro on the map and we saw the bright blue dots for super high speeds coming from Islesboro. So if we want our our map to look the same way. Let's all take that speed test, and maybe eventually we can see our red and yellow, and I think some green lights turn to blue. That would be really nice. So again, Matt's posted the link in the chat and in the Facebook comments, and we will just ask you to encourage other folks you know to take that the broadband speed test. So thank you so much for that. And just to give a quick I think we'll pop off of this and give us a second to organize everybody's questions, and we will jump into the Q&A. So I think, Roger, to start with, there are a bunch of questions trying to understand the numbers a bit more. And I think it would be great if you could sort of walk us through again the business model and just give us an understanding of, like, me as a consumer or a subscriber, or the non-subscriber, like, what are people paying and when are they paying it? You mentioned annual, and then there's, just like there's what I would be paying for service. There's what everyone needs to pay because they're paying for the system. So could you talk us through a little bit more detail about how that works? And then there was also a question of, based on your taxes, like, how does that work? So I have a $100,000 valuation, versus I have a $300,000 valuation. Could you just share a little bit more about the business model?
Yeah, again, that's a good question. The business model is that the tax base pays for the repayment of the construction bond, which is about $260,000 a year. And the town pays to keep the system in good working order. And that's an additional, I'm going to say $100,000. I can't remember exactly, but it's on that order. And that $100,000 pays the leases to CMP and Fairpoint, who own the poles. We have to pay CMP and Fairpoint to be on the poles. The lion's share of that $100,000 goes into an insurance policy for the system in the event that there's a major storm and the system would be damaged significantly. We have insurance for that. But the rest of the cost, most if all of the GWI bills, get paid by the subscriber fee, which is $360 a year per household or business. So the first number that you need to hear is $360 a year gets you internet service at your house. And then for your $300,000 house, or your $100,000 house, or your $6 million house, your mill rate is adjusted so that it shares that $360,000 taxpayer burden. And I'm using rough numbers here. Please don't hold me that these are the exact numbers, but this is what I remember. That $360,000 of taxpayer support gets spread out. And as I said, 83% of the homesteaded properties on the island, their tax increase plus the $30 a month plus $25 a month for the phone doesn't add up to $85 a month. So, or it may be a little more than that, but that's basically what it is. And the reason is we look for every way to save money, especially on the operating side. And the select board has been very clear with us that the yearly subscriber fee must pay for the GWI contract costs. And that's pretty close to being true. The exception is when GWI comes out to do a repair, the town would pay for that repair. In addition, if, you know, in the last storm, something happened at someone's house that the dropped fiber came off their house, for instance, in the wind, that's fixed free. The subscribers don't pay for that. The town commitment to the subscribers is that the town keeps it in good working order. Now, there's exceptions to that. If a subscriber says, "Oh, my internet isn't working, I need somebody to come now," and it happens to be Saturday at 8 o'clock at night, our contractor, Paige Clayson, will roll in his truck to go fix it. But you have to pay, you know, an additional fee for that off hours service call. But generally, people don't pay for the service calls, and that's the benefit of this model of the town keeps it in good working order. And as I said, you know, with the biggest number is the bond repayment. The second biggest number is paying the insurance bill, which is unbelievable. And then the third biggest number is that the taxpayers pay is the pole leases, the leases, and the various fees that we have to pay. But it is a very simple model. It's just like the town built any other piece of infrastructure, a bridge, a sewage plant, pick any of those. This is exactly the same. The town foots the bill for the infrastructure, and the people who use it pay the cost of what it costs to keep it lit, in our case, or in this case of a sewage treatment plant running. And for those of you who have lived out in the West, it's not so much true on the East Coast. Maybe it's a Puritan thing, Puritan history thing. But out West, in Washington, Oregon, California, especially Idaho and Montana, Nevada, Wyoming, there's a lot of municipal utility companies. It's very common in the West to have the municipality be the electric company. It's very rare on the East Coast, and that has to do with the timing and the way it was built out.
Super. Thanks so much, Roger. And just to build on that just a little bit. So people now, if I'm a property owner on Islesboro, I'm a taxpayer, I'm paying $365 a year. $360 a year to be able to have internet. And if
functional internet, right?
Okay. And if I want to subscribe to that internet, then I would pay an additional amount.
Oh, no.
Okay,
no,
so it's
no.
just and then the bond and the operating costs, etc., is what I would be paying through my taxes.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
I don't know about Vinyl Haven, but we have a health center in Islesboro that costs substantially more than the cost of the broadband. And people are happy to pay it because it's so helpful to have a health center out here. That's an example of the kind of thing that we have to do on an island.
So once I'm assuming this is a 20-year municipal
Correct.
bond. So what happens after the 20 years?
The taxes go down. The lifetime of the system is estimated to be upwards of 40 years. There's no technological reason that it couldn't expand to greater speeds. We could run a 10 gigabit network. It's just that the equipment at 1 gigabit is fairly inexpensive. So the fiber will outlive me and many of the people on the island from an infrastructure standpoint. There will be other technologies coming online. There may be other ways to do the connection from the backbone on the street to a person's home. We have the SpaceX satellites that are promising improved satellite speeds. So there will be other technologies available But you just have to decide, what you want. Those of us who have used satellite internet realize that, hey, in a thunderstorm, it doesn't work. Or in heavy clouds, it doesn't work. These are all little issues that you have to take into account when you decide what you want for your home.
So thinking about additional costs, but like the cost of owning the infrastructure, is the money that's being collected through taxes and through the $360 annual fee, does that also account for some kind of reserve for repair? I know you mentioned like operating costs, maintenance, but I'm just thinking of normal town would have a road reserve fund. Is there a broadband infrastructure reserve fund that's not part of this?
No, it's part of it.
Okay.
And it was accumulated over the course of a few years, and we top it up on a yearly basis as part of the town meeting approval of the town budget. We try to maintain about $75,000 in that account when the town meeting occurs. And that sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but the reason it's that high is because our deductible on the insurance, I think, is 50. So if there was a hurricane that wiped the system out, we wanted to make sure that we had enough money to pay the insurance deductible.
Super. And then you mentioned the additional burden on town staff. And is there consideration of like, have you had to expand hours? Have you thought about adding another staff person? I'm just thinking of how has that changed costs in the administration, or has it changed costs in the administration?
The arrival of the broadband did not change the number of employees in the town office. But Tina, our primary broadband person in the town office, does spend a portion of every day as part at doing something about the broadband. She did today, for example. And the finances, when the budget is put together for the broadband at the town meeting, includes payments, if you will, into the budget for the front office of the town. I think it's, maybe, so we offset the budget for the broadband, the subscriber costs offset the cost of the town office personnel working on the broadband.
Okay, yeah, so that's just part of your operating costs. Yep. Okay.
And this isn't a special budget in town, Janet, it's just part of the operations of the town, but we do a careful budget every year in preparation for the town meeting.
So I just have a question I'm just curious about your Fairpoint. Fairpoint was your incumbent before you started. That's correct. And you didn't, I think you mentioned you didn't really have anybody else as an incumbent, or it was just Fairpoint?
No, we did not have another incumbent. Fairpoint did have a DSL system out here. They still do. And they have commercial customers out here. So they're very much still on the island. Their residential business, as it is all over the country, is I think, finding other alternatives, whether it's cell phone or what have you. But, as I said, I think Fairpoint has been willing to have, at least the last couple of conversations I've had with them in the last few years, seems to be much more willing to have a conversation where, in 2014, 2015, they just didn't think we were serious, that we would never do it. It's basically that's the attitude we got from the management there. But I think they've really understood the importance of broadband and are much more interested in having these conversations now.
So they're
much more flexible about it.
So they essentially have just continued to maintain their DSL infrastructure, or did they make any moves when you guys were, saying we're going to build this system? Did they come in and try to, say, oh, we're going to build our own fiber system? Did they do anything to? I guess what I'm saying is, were they nervous about the competition?
let's see, what can I say here? The answer is yes. I think they were nervous once they realized we were serious and we were going to do this, that they were going to lose customers. They weren't happy about that. As I said, no one in the state wanted us to succeed.
And you mentioned that you now have, you believe, around 670 subscribers, and is
I think that's where we'll end the year, something like that.
okay. And so how close to all homes or possible locations on the island is that? How many I would say, I don't know the proper terminology, but how many homes are there that could hook up, and how does this 670 rate against that?
When in the very early days, I wrote a little program to call every 734 number and count how many real phones were at the end of that. And I came up with a number that I recall was like 724 or 725, 734 exchange telephone numbers on the island. That's the number we used to calculate and base our take rate. So we're upwards of 660 against what we thought at the time was about 725. It's a very hard number to find. Fairpoint wasn't willing to share with us how many customers they had. We know that there's about 1,000 improved properties and just under 1,000 electric meters, but neither of those numbers are indicative of how many people are actually trying to communicate, because a lot of properties have multiple electric meters and two houses, and some of the summer compounds are monstrous. So that's just the way it works out. But I would say we're in the high 600s now against an estimate of around 700 and some actual potential subscribers.
Yep, amazing. That's great. Well, I want to make sure that I address any comments that haven't come in through the chat. So I just want to invite folks, if you're participating in the Zoom room and you want to come off of your mute and come on to video and ask any questions directly. And we do have a couple of I think we've got Pat McCormick, who is one of our broadband committee members here, as well as Jan-Ann. And I saw Andy Dorr on the line, but he has since jumped off. So if anyone in our Zoom audience has any questions, please, now's the time.
Hi, did you have an outside consulting group to do the implementation of this process on Islesboro?
That's a really good question. Thank you for asking it. I didn't mention that. Early on, we had a contract with Tilson Engineering in Portland to help us think through what our options were. We just went out with the hat in our hands and raised the money to pay for that planning in the early stages, and then that was later matched by a town appropriation at one of the town meetings. When we actually started constructing the system, we had really three entities helping us. One was the company that did the physical construction, bid on the job, won the bid, and that was a company called Waveguide in Nashua. We had Sewell and Company. The town and the select board felt strongly that we should have a third-party project manager for a $3.8 million project. And we hired, as part of the construction cost, we hired Sewell and Company out of, I believe, Old Town or Orono, to help us manage the project. That worked out pretty well. And since then, the lead player at Sewell has gone out on his own and is one of the people I recommend to towns trying to think through these issues. And I'm happy to give you that name if you don't already have it. And then, in fact, we had a part of the construction contract included payments to GWI so that they would accept the network that waveguide was building. So there were quite a few third-party eyes on the construction project. Now that it's constructed, it's just the town and GWI.
Thank you.
But good question.
We do have time for another question. If there's anyone in the audience that in the Zoom audience who would like to ask a question, if you want to post a question in the chat, and I'll just check again to see if there's anything that's come through our Facebook comments. But please
And
just,
Gabe,
oh, sorry, go ahead,
Gabe,
Roger.
you can always forward any questions that happen tomorrow or next year. Just send them to me in email. I'll be happy to answer them. Or send them to imb@townofislesboro.com, and Tina will figure out the right way to get it answered.
Super, thank you so much. Anybody else before we close tonight? Well, I will do a plug again for that link that Matt has put in the chat to learn more about Islesboro's broadband journey and their broadband efforts. Do check that out. It's very comprehensive and really helpful to read through.
Gabe, can I interrupt you? You
Certainly.
mentioned the speed test. I really encourage people to do that. The wisdom of the federal government constructed a system of how to decide or how to know what was available in every particular census tract in America. And it was lobbied that system of reporting, that map of served and unserved communities, was heavily influenced by the telecom industry and is very, very misleading. As a result, places like Islesboro looked like we had broadband when no one had it. And it was because we were lumped in a big census tract with the mainland. And likewise, communities like Vinyl Haven just would not show up on the FCC version of those maps. Governor King Senator King has been a vocal proponent of trying to fix that. But until that happens, it's efforts like the Maine Broadband Coalition speed test to really find out what's out there on the ground so that they can know where the underserved areas are. It's a really important thing.
Great. Thanks so much, Roger. Okay, well, I think with that, we will call it a night. Pat, did you have anything you wanted to add before we close?
No, just to thank Roger. You know, a lot of us have been long admiring your project, and it's great to hear about it in more detail. And it's great to see the really great turnout tonight from everybody and their interest. So thank you, Gabe and Janan too.
Yeah, and again, anything I can do to help. I'm not on a crusade. Anything I can do to help or answer questions, feel free.
Super. And I would just encourage people, I think most everyone has my email. You can find it through the town of Vinyl Haven as well. And Jenny Ann's email is available at the broadband page on the town's website. So just reach out to us with questions. And if you have questions for Roger, we'd be happy to pass those along as well. So I just want to thank Roger so much for joining us. Thank you, Janian, for facilitating your conversation again. And I want to wish everyone a good night. Oh, and a plug real quick. Please put our next event on your calendar. It will be Wednesday, February 17th, and we'll have a 6 p.m. conversation. And just keep your eyes and ears open for the content of that conversation. And we will look forward to seeing you there.
And tell your friends to come too.
Tell your friends to come too. Thank you so much. Have a good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.